What is the number one determining factor in the nutrient density of our beef?
And we had a basic question, which was, is nutrient variation significant? Do nutrients vary in potatoes, in apples, in blueberries, in, cucumbers, whatever? And quickly we found out, yes, it's massive. And the second question was, what causes it? Is it genetics? Is it soil type? Is it, certain, fertility programs, management practices? And it looked like the answer was soil health. Soil health is what causes nutrient variation, not this genetic or this soil type or this management practice.
And what paradigms are we going to have to challenge, even of the paradigm challengers, to get to a higher nutrient density in our beef?
And then have that diversity build up the functioning of the soil so that it would build up the functioning of my cattle. So it would build up the functioning of my family. And so that was really what started that. And and just his whole mindset of getting away with dogma, like, cover cropping, no-till, all these different things, all these dogmas that overall have their place. But if you worship them rather than the final product, then you can get yourself into a square corner. And so I've basically opened up my aperture to everything. I got, I'd gone strip tillage and then went no-till. And last year, what really helped me turn the corner was getting a buffalo till cultivator out of somebody's grove and using that to slice open rows in my alfalfa field that I could then get this multi-species crop established in, because otherwise I just couldn't get it established. The alfalfa was too competitive.
All that and more on this episode 501 of the Working Cows podcast, brought to you by Remedy Animal Solutions.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows podcast. Very excited to be joined today by Dan Kittredge and Karl Palmberg, and we're going to talk to them about a journey that Karl's been on to maximize, optimize, achieve the best and most nutrient-dense beef that he can. And he's been doing this in a place where it's not conventional to do it, in Iowa. And he has been going down paths that have been challenging his own paradigms about what is best as far as nutrient density is concerned. So very excited for this conversation. Very excited to share this conversation with you. And here it is. Dan, Karl, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows podcast.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, and shout out to the Provision House, the home of the direct marketed beef business and other provisions of the 2S Ranch here east of Dallas, Texas. We're right in Dallas, Texas. Me, a prairie kid from 35 miles from the nearest gas station. I would say we're in downtown Dallas, but I'm sure that's not right. So it just looks like it because there's big, tall buildings in every direction from where I'm sitting right now. But people coming in and out and buying grass-finished beef and pecans, raised with hogs grazing amongst the trees and all kinds of cool stuff that kind of is fitting for this conversation. And I didn't ask Bart if I could record here until about 10 minutes ago. And he was gracious, said, yeah, just sit here at the long table where we host long table dinners here throughout the holiday season and year round and have at it. So very much appreciate their willingness to let us impose. And I appreciate you guys for the work that you're doing and being willing to join me here for this conversation. So I think I'll start with you, Karl, just kind of to give you an opportunity to give an introduction to what it is that what you're doing and where you're doing it.
Well, my family and I live in northwest Iowa, right near Larchwood, which is very close to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, the largest area in our town. And we have been trying to transform our farm and ranch, about 700 acres of row crop ground, as well as pasture and grass ground, to a regenerative ranch as quickly and effectively as we can. And so we are working on our pasture management as well as planting multi-species forage mixes into our row crop ground to produce healthy steakhouse quality beef. So something that has the nutritional benefits that we want and the eating experience that we desire as well. So we want to have all kinds of different regenerative things come from our farm, like a cornucopia. But right now, grass-fed beef is kind of the first thing that we feel confident and excited about actually selling. And once we get that up and running, we'll let ourselves delve into other things.
Is that because there's less of an education process about beef than there is maybe other products? I mean, I suppose chicken would be another one that's pretty low on the education, but when you start to talk about grass-finished pork and lamb and other things like that, maybe it's a little more of an education process. Is that part of the thinking there?
An education process for me, probably, just because I grew up raising cattle, and so it's something
Sure.
that I know a little bit about already. And there's probably more of an established marketplace just in the general population looking for that quote-unquote grass-fed beef.
Sure. Gotcha. And just a little bit more there. Talk to me about the journey that you've been on. How long have you been on this journey as far as the getting row crop acres back into multi-species cover crops and the grass finishing?
I grew up on the farm. My dad moved onto the farm in 1938. And then when I grew up raising cows and farming with my dad, went to college at South Dakota State. After that, joined the military full-time, active duty for about 10, 12 years. So moved around with that and then decided that was not going to be on active duty anyway in my forever career. So moved back and did two things, did the farming and ranching, and then continued military service in the South Dakota Air National Guard. And so for the next decade or 12 years, I did both. And that's where I kind of reinvented our farm and tried to reinvent myself as a farmer as well, and started out from doing things just as we had and just endeavored to educate myself on how things grew, how plants grew, how we interacted with the soil. And it generally led me, guided me, herded me down the regenerative agriculture path as my just intellectual curiosity drove me. And then just that drive to not want to do anything but the best drove me there as well. And so we continue to kind of reinvent things. First, we went from full-scale tillage to strip tillage. And then eventually we stopped raising soybeans and corn and did some alfalfa. And now we're transitioning out of that to a multi-species forage mix that I can strip graze with virtual fencing on my finishers to produce hopefully high quality. It seems like it so far with really good lab results on the omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid ratio anyway, and being able to get performance to finish these animals in well under 2 years is what our goal is.
Okay, speaking of education, can you educate me on the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio and what's desirable and what's normal and where you're at?
I could educate you on what I know about that, but I think it would probably be a better high-class education on that.
Okay. Well, yeah, maybe it's a natural segue then, Dan, if you want to share kind of a little bit of your history too on this, and then we'll talk fatty acid ratios.
History about where I come from, what I'm doing, or just
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I grew up on a small organic dairy mixed farm in Massachusetts. Mixed animals, veggies, fruit trees. Yeah, when I I managed the farm through my teens and 20s. When I got married, I thought I would try to be a farmer myself, and realized that, like my parents, I couldn't make a living farming. There was part to it, but not using chemicals. Organic is nice in certain ways, but if I wanted to make a living, there's more I had to learn. So I started going to conferences, reading books, attending seminars, and dialing in pieces of the puzzle that I had not been aware of. That were sort of outside of the organic sort of rubric, and rapidly got to a point of decreasing cost of production, increasing economic viability, and started giving workshops, and those turned into courses and turned into an educational organization founded in 2010 by Nutrient Food Association. So I've been working on educating farmers now for more than 15 years on basically how nature set things up, how plants have been growing for a long time without fertilizer. And we've also been doing in the past few years a bunch of research to look at nutrient levels in food and, um, thinking that they were varied. They weren't, not all food is uniform. Um, we created this term nutrient density in 2008 to refer to the conversation about nutrient variation, because at that point in time, when I started asking these questions, there wasn't even a word for it. So, yeah, we created that term. I've been educating around that as the sort of the work spread further and further afield by word of mouth. The farmers saying, "Come teach us a course here, teach us a course there." So that looks like it works well when you work with nature. Actually, cost of production goes down, soil health, ecosystem function, farm viability, animal welfare, nutrient levels, human health. They all seem to be basically different facets of the same thing. But there was no metrics, there was no empiricism around it. And so we started looking at doing research, categorizing, what's expected nutrient variation in food, what causes it, which, we can talk about now or later, and building handheld meters to flashlights that get readings in real time. So no one would ever have to trust a label or a certification or marketing ever again. They actually have a handheld ray gun that they get 20 out of 100, 80 out of 100 to anything. So that's sort of the background. But for the past 4 years, we've been working on trying to develop a nutrient density definition in beef. So we could actually say this steak is at 80 out of 100, 40 out of 100, 20 out of 100. You could actually empirically measure and find the biomarkers that connect to soil health, ecosystem function, animal, welfare, human health, et cetera. And so, yeah, we've been doing a lot of research. We've identified a whole bunch of nutrients. Omega-3/6 is one that some people know about. And basically you want the ratio of 3 to 6 to be as close as possible. So if they say 2 to 1 is great. You can get down to 1 to 1. Most grain finished beef is like 8 to 1. Your poultry will be 12 or 15 to 1. Your pork will be 20 to 1. So, it's not natural for animals to eat grain. It's bad for them, and it's bad for us if we eat their products, their eggs, their milk, their meat. Actually, these ratios are unhealthy. They connect to inflammation. They connect to chronic disease. And so there's a lot of stuff with people not being well that has to do with the way their food was raised. Yeah, what we found, is a whole bunch of detail we can get into, but the omega-3/6 ratio, it looks like when farmers, ranchers are having their animals eat green things, those 3/6 ratios look good. And when they have diverse polycultures, multiple species of green things their plants, their animals have access to, that's better. And it really doesn't seem to matter where you are geographically. Doesn't matter if you're eating animals are eating annuals or perennials or native species. It's the diversity and the greenness that correlates with them being more well. So, yeah.
So, yeah, when you talk about the greenness, are you talking about like actively photosynthesizing, not dormant? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, there's some things that happen when the pasture goes to seed. And that's oftentimes what people have their animals eating over winter is maybe not going to seed, but when it's brown, it doesn't have as much value, obviously. And so there's some interesting things like haylage. If you can cut your polyculture pasture and put it in a silage bunk and feed it out over the winter, you get better weight gain, better omega-3/6 ratios, better marbling, better choice and prime, ratings on the beef itself. So yeah, basically, and you can even take that haylage and you can feed it out, when there's green grass to grow and watch what the cows do. In most cases, they'll eat that before they eat the green grass because the act of having the microbes pre-digest it makes it more bioavailable, means they have to use less energy to digest it, and so they can gain weight faster. And it looks like we could actually go 1 to 1 for speed of finishing with the confinement operations on TMR, whatever it is. with speed and with choice and prime cuts rating, and you can actually get 1-to-1 on the omega-3, omega-6, which is completely epic. So the opportunities to do finishing differently and create a massive change in the way the landscape is managed, which will decrease cost of production for farmers, increase resiliency. There's some really exciting stuff that we've been starting to tease out as part of this research project.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you're telling me is it's not true that we can't feed the world with products raised this way.
Yeah. I think they said that there was more pounds of beef being produced in Iowa in 1492 than there was in 1992.
Wow.
If you actually count the buffalo as a cow,
Yeah.
and you look at how the Native Americans were managing the landscape, which they were doing, they weren't just randomly
Right.
hunting and gathering; they were proactively coordinating.
Mhm.
They were producing more beef in Iowa than is being produced now. So more efficient to work with nature, and there was no wheel, there was no plow, there was no fertilizer, insecticide,
Yep.
combine.
Right.
And there was many other things being produced, not just beef.
Our sponsor today is Remedy Animal Solutions. I recently had an opportunity to talk with Daniel Dirksen, who has been using these remedies on a large-scale beef operation in Alberta.
My family, my two brothers, my aunt, uncle, and my parents, along with all our spouses, we own and operate Dirksen Farms and Gemstone Cattle Company. We have a large commercial cow herd, feed stock, purebred Hereford, Red Angus herd, conventional feedlot, and in 2018 we started direct marketing grass-fed, grass-finished beef. Since 2020, I guess when COVID broke out, we were starting to field a whole bunch of calls on what was in the vaccine that we were giving cattle. Our protocol is no antibiotics, no implant for the stuff that we direct market through our grass finishing program. And just the amount of calls we were getting, we thought, man, we should look into this. The fall of 24 would have been the first time I used it. So I detoxed my whole cow herd and gave them immune boost when we preg tested in the fall. And then I did the same thing with all my calves in the fall. And then I did that, and she sent me some other remedies and said, well, just put it in water and treat salt. And I kind of just sat on it all winter, not really sure how to do that. And talking with some friends, I said, if we're going to do this, let's see if she'll come up and visit with us, tell us more about it, and show us how to do it. And so she did. In April of 25, she came up. So she gave me some remedies. One was hormonal wake up and pro vitality, and she said, give this to your cattle like 3 weeks before calving time. You're going to see better mothering heifers. They're going to calve out better. And that's kind of where I saw the first evidence that there's something here. We calved probably 150 heifers. I'd given them the remedies. We helped very few heifers. There were some heifers that had some calves that in the past, I'm like, man, I would have probably had to pull that, and they didn't. The heifers were fine. They mothered unbelievable. We pair out. They stuck with their calves when we tagged them after birth. When we paired out last spring, when we paired out right to the bitter end, every cow had a calf, and they all claimed them. So right away then I thought, man, there's something to this.
If you're interested, you can find out more at remedyanimalsolutions.com. And on top of that, Karl, when you think about the fact that 180 to 190 million acres are currently planned to be planted to corn and soybeans this spring, and the vast majority of that, I would say, is never going to see livestock and is only going to photosynthesize for the 90 to 100 and whatever, 20, 30 days out of the year that crop is growing, it's kind of obvious that we could feed everybody with year-round grazed livestock. Is that accurate in your understanding as well?
I agree. At this point, it's kind of hard and daunting to quantify that and to extrapolate. You're using a lot of assumptions on either side of the argument when you try to say either we can't or we can. One of the big differences there is, what are we feeding them if we're feeding them one way or the other? And that's what I appreciate so much about Dan and his passion and the work that he's done, is he's showing the difference between the quality of food and then how it interacts with people, to say that you're comparing apples to oranges. You can feed them a whole bunch of this junk, or you can feed them a lot of this really good stuff. And then let's look and see how it comes out in the long run on either of those two options.
Yeah, very good. And Dan, let's talk about that. It sounds like it would be hard to choose what to focus on. I mean, you've been on this journey as far as all these, just inventing the term nutrient density, and then all the different things that you could measure. How are you going about choosing what you're going to measure first?
Well, our first work was with 25 different crops, just plants, roots, leaves, fruits, and grains. And we had a basic question, which was, is nutrient variation significant? Do nutrients vary in potatoes, in apples, and blueberries, and, cucumbers, whatever? And quickly we found out, yes, it's massive. And the second question was, what causes it? Is it genetics? Is it soil type? Is it, certain, fertility programs, management practices? And it looked like the answer was soil health. Soil health is what causes nutrient variation, not this genetic or this soil type or this management practice. The third question was, can you build a handheld consumer priced flush of light meter that anybody could use at the grocery store or at the farm stand to measure for themselves nutrient levels in food so that you wouldn't ever have to trust a label or certification? Yes, figured that out. So the next question was, how do you say something is good or bad? How do you say, this carrot is better than that carrot? Because a carrot's a big complex thing. There's tons of nutrients in it. And that was when we chose to work on beef, because beef has the largest ecological footprint. There's more land on this planet used to produce beef than anything else. And our thought was, if we could develop a 1 to 100 standard for quality in beef that connected to soil health, that connected to farm viability, that connected to human health, connected to animal welfare, that could begin, and we could take a metric and give it to consumers and have them begin pulling through the better stuff, because they can test. If you got 20 or 40 and 80 on the shelf, you know which one's 80, which one's a 20. Probably not going to take the 20. You might take the 40, but you probably leave the 20. So we basically leave on the shelf the lower quality and begin to have the incentive for farmers to focus on nutrition instead of volume. And so that was a complicated project. How do you figure out what good and bad are, and how do you develop a continuum? So we basically said, let's get samples of beef from all over the planet. We got samples from 4 continents. Every farmer had to send in a steak from 3 different animals for triplicate purposes, for statistical significance. Each steak was analyzed for, at the end, 150 nutrients. We started out with 800 nutrients. So a big complex, let's actually look deeply. Then we looked at the manure, the fecal sample. We looked at over 200 different microbes in the manure, multiple kingdoms, levels and ratios, and let's look deeply into the microbiome. Then we had the farmers send in the fodder, whether it was the monoculture pasture or the polyculture pasture or the hay or the TMR, whatever they were eating in that last 60, 90 days of their life. Then we had them send in the soil that fodder grew in, whether it was the cornfield or the paddock. Then we asked them a whole bunch of management data questions, how old were they, what was their gender, how were they moved or not moved, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally we asked them, we did human health trials. So feed humans this beef and see what happens to them. Feed them that beef and see what happens to them. Feed them the Impossible Burger and see what happens to them. So if you can look at the human health response overlaid against the soil metrics, overlaid against the fodder, overlaid against the microbiome, overlaid against the biochemistry, overlaid against the management, you can look at all that together, hand that to scientists and say, hey guys, use statistics, tell us if you can find any patterns. They did. And it looks like we've got 8 biomarkers. So 2 elements, 2 vitamins, 2 fatty acids, 2 secondary metabolites. These 8 nutrients, if you just measure these 8, we'll be able to tell you this steak is 20 out of 100 or 40 out of 100 or 80 out of 100. So that's the statistical, that's the experimental design. Can we connect everything from soil health to human health in a scientific paper and show this is all connected? Because for many people, it's kind of intuitive, but they're actually, if you want to say it's true, you have to have a paper where you published it that said it was true for it to be for you to say anything. So yeah, that's the process. And yeah, right now we're working on doing 20 more crops that way. So can we do potatoes? Can we do wheat? Can we do dairy? Can we do apples? Can we do beans? Yes, we can do all the world's food that way. And if we get those biomarkers, then we can hand them to people that build machinery, build instruments, build flash of light little sensors And it looks like, the camera on your phone, or one of the cameras on your phone, could be one of these sensors. And so we're talking about like 2030, people are able to pull their phone out of their pocket, flash a light at the food in the grocery store, and see relatively how good this brand is versus that brand, or what's in this store versus that store, or this farm stand versus that farm stand. So we can actually have complete transparency based on nutrition for people who buy food for their families. And we think that that could be a pull through for the supply chain to focus on quality instead of volume, which would have amazing ripple effects, all kinds of ripple effects on all kinds of things.
Yeah. And so you talk about flash of light scanners, you talk about using your phone. Are we thinking of QR codes, or does it need to be more controlled than that, or what's that?
You're actually measuring the food itself.
Okay. All right.
It's called spectroscopy. So
Yep.
you're flashing the light at the carrot, and you're
Sure.
taking a picture of the nutrients in the carrot, and that's what spits out on your phone, or the steak, or the potato. It's how the Hubble Space Telescope can tell you what is in a star 10,000 light years away, or in a planet 10,000 light years away, it's a science called spectroscopy. And
Yep.
so our thought is, if we can read things 10,000 light years away with a flash of light, we should be able to read things a millimeter away with a flash of light.
Can it go through packaging?
Basic idea. And we got a paper published in a journal called Nature Scientific Reports. It's a Nature journal.
Yeah.
It can probably go through saran wrap. It can't go through cardboard. So depending, yeah. If you got a jug of milk, it's in a cardboard container, you're not going to be able to flash a light through that and get a reading.
So, okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. And the clarification. Karl, I see you smiling and nodding along here. What are some of the things that are going through your mind? What are you thinking about all this?
I'm just totally stoked about it. And that's like our mindset right now, is to run as hard and fast as we can, so that when that first consumer is able to flash light on something, ours comes out at least 90 out of 100. And then Katie bar the door from there. So yeah, until then, I just want to make my family and others as healthy as possible. But like economically and as a capitalist, that's what excites me about this whole thing. And I guess justifies my putting as much effort and money and time into what we're doing as possible, beyond just making my neighbors and my family healthy. It's just that prospect that we can not just make my farm big and profitable, but like Dan is pushing towards, like revolutionize agriculture from a not pushing it, but pulling it, and just let the consumer just drive change, and then watch distillers' grains disappear, and watch hormone implants disappear, and watch erosion go away, and have that do it just market driven. No government interference necessary.
Yeah. Dan, what were some of the things that were maybe surprising to you, or things that stood out to you through this process, as far as maybe even the way that the body handles different quality of meat, 20 out of 100 versus 60 out of 100, or whatever you want to say? What have been some of the things that have stood out to you through this process?
Well, I think the first thing that stood out in our first work was that local and organic and, all that stuff didn't really seem to correlate with better. It really didn't. That a variety and individual practices and certification labels and point of purchase. If you grow food in a garden or get it at a farmer's market, it's not necessarily more nutritious. Like that was a bit of a wake up call, but because I grew up on a small organic farm and we knew we were better. And then when you get a bunch of data that says no, everybody's mediocre actually, or just about everybody's below mediocre actually, in relation to what's possible. That's a humbling thing. The fact that soil health, life in the soil, like the microbiome, like is actually what correlates to system function, actually makes a ton of sense. But it was nice to have that verified. With the beef, I love the fact that Like, it doesn't seem to matter where in the world you are. You can be, in Wyoming or Virginia, and if you manage the land well, you can produce equally high quality beef. So there's no it doesn't seem to matter about genetics either. Like it's really about what the animals eat. That seems to be the thing, is like the function of the ecosystem is way more powerful than the rest of the stuff that everybody gets worked up about. And there's no way to really get a certification label about function of ecosystem. Like, kind of the best way to do it is to measure the quality of the food.
Hmm.
And so all these claims, and there's, carbon markets and blah, 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 and blah, blah. And, we are regenerative because we cover cropped, and great that you cover cropped. That does not mean that you have high levels of soil health. It's a soil health that matters, that is the thing. And it's a living system, and it requires sensitivity and attention by the farmer on a regular basis. You can't just give a prescription and expect to get there. All those things are, none of them actually were too surprising, but it's nice to be able to say with confidence, when I go around the world and give my keynotes and I've got my slides, I'm like, look, here's the graphs. It's pretty much black and white. These are the facts. It sure looks like it. I think that's cool.
And it's soil health on an increasing plane of improvement that is generally going to come out on top, along with some management practices like regular moves and some of those things. Is that kind of what I hear you saying?
Well, how you move the animals affects the soil health, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows that. And what happens with the climate, if it hasn't rained for 4 months, and there's no water, then system function is going to be much, much lower. So you got to be designing in to your system, ways to balance out those extremes. But yeah, you can't really say do this thing and things will be better. It's much more about understanding what that land needs, what its limiting factors are. And it does seem like the bar, could be extremely high, right? But right now, most people are doing a pretty mediocre job. So being better than most people is not hard. Yeah, but a lot of people are doing it. A lot of grazers around the country and in other countries from completely different backgrounds, bioregions, climate zones are all doing quite a good job. It's just that's whatever it is, 1% of the supply chain, right?
Right. Yeah. Karl, how is this affecting day-to-day decisions at your place? As far as, just how is this shaping what you're doing on a daily basis?
When I heard the results that Dan and the Bionutrient Food Association were putting out, I increased the diversity of my mixes from 5 species to 30. And I drove after species diversity and diversity of cropping system in full afterburner. And so that really made me drive towards that, and to get diversity, and then have that diversity build up the functioning of the soil so that it would build up the functioning of my cattle. So it would build up the functioning of my family. And so that was really what started that. And and just his whole mindset of getting away with dogma, cover cropping, no-till, all these different things, all these dogmas that overall have their place. But if you worship them rather than the final product, then you can get yourself into a square corner. And so I've basically opened up my aperture to everything. I'd gone strip tillage and then no-till. And last year, what really helped me turn the corner was getting a buffalo till cultivator out of somebody's grove and using that to slice open rows in my alfalfa field that I could then get this multi-species crop established in, because otherwise I just couldn't get it established. The alfalfa was too competitive and I was just wasting my money on seed. But that, sacrificing that dogma for the near term to get energy and diversity into the system to hopefully get that rhizophagy cycle going again, and all the other diversity, that has really affected it. As well as, we do what Dan was referring to there of, I call it intensive rotational feeding. So even while I'm rotational grazing these animals through these multi-species forage crops, I've got a bale wagon with silage inserts, and I give them baleage that has mixtures of alfalfa and winter rye that have fermented, and the winter rye produces acetic acid, which is the major acid in a healthy rumen, as far as I understand. And so that gives them the benefit of that, but it also gives them probiotic for whatever else they're consuming.
Nice.
Yeah.
Really nice. I've never
Yeah.
heard anybody say full afterburner in relation to my work.
Well, that was my military job, so yeah.
I like it. I went into it full afterburner. I like that a lot.
No doubt. No doubt. I appreciate that. Yeah. And so, Dan, talk to me a little bit about some of the effects or the range of effects maybe this food is having on people. I mean, like on one end of it, we've got Captain Crunch blueberry syrup, in Walmart. And then on the other end of it, we've got Karl Palmberg's grass finished beef, and whatever term du jour you want to use to up that description, we can talk about that. But talk to me about what quote unquote food or food like substances, even tomatoes that look like a tomato, but once they're in your body don't act like a tomato, and what they're doing compared to what maybe the higher end of your scale, what those foods are doing in the body.
Yeah. I like to say, there's this word we have in relation to what we eat that starts with junk and ends with food. And I say that's like, there's your first mistake. If it's junk.
It's like grape nuts. There's neither grape nor nuts.
but don't call it food. Call it
right.
junk.
Yes.
Like these processed products are definitely detrimental to our being. And we all know it. And the marketing is out there, and the kids get, once they get a taste of it, then they whine and complain and give you a hard time. And when they see the ads, and it's a real it's difficult to keep that out of your house, right? To keep it not being eaten by your family. And so the first boundary I would say is like, just don't eat junk. And if you know deep down inside it is a processed product, like it's probably you're just better off not eating it. There's this guy, Stefan von Vliet, who's our primary investigator for our research project at Utah State. We sort of designed the study and raised the money and coordinated all the farmers, but we shipped it all to him to do the lab work. And he's been doing some work with, I think it was Green Acres. He did this test where they were feeding people regenerative organic produce and just conventional produce. And they have showing minor variance, which I would say in part is because regenerative organic is not necessarily more nutritious. But the big difference in food and human health is eating food and not eating junk. So that's the first step. Just don't eat junk. And that's going to be giving you massive percents of the way there. Then once you're there, you can say, God gave me a tongue that works really well as a nutrient monitoring system. And so when I eat a tomato with no flavor, that's telling me that it is not good for me. It is not going to cause my children to be healthy. So I should be discerning and find a tomato with flavor. And so, what do they say? Overfed and undernourished. A lot of the food we have these days available to us is very low in the full spectrum of nutrients that our bodies need to function well. Those things that we experience as flavor, they got fancy scientific names like polyphenols and terpenoids and alkaloids and stuff. But basically, if the food has flavor, not sweet, but flavor, like the carrot flavor, the tomato flavor, milk flavor, beef flavor, if it's got flavor in and of itself, those compounds that you experience as flavor only get there when everything else is functioning well. That's a sign of overall quality. And that intensity of flavor is what is actually reverses chronic disease. Like those compounds, polyphenols, terpenoids, alkaloids, etc., are the things that rip apart cancer, rip apart diabetes. Like they literally take those proteins of those diseases in our bodies and shred them. So, you can eat food that doesn't have flavor, that is still food, and maintain But if your body's at all weak or worn down or whatever, and you want to gain vigor back, it does seem to be the case that eating food with flavor is the most strategic way to get there. Um, and unfortunately, a lot of what we got in the supply chain does not have flavor in it. That's why people put steak sauce in their steak, because it doesn't have flavor. Like, salt is good to add to beef steak, but it should have flavor that comes from what the animals eat. So yeah, it's all pretty actually intuitive, and it's what our grandparents knew. And just now we got fancy scientists that are able to publish papers and say, yes, this is true. But it's right in the face of a lot of quote unquote food industry, right? Processed product industry that passes as food. That's not in their benefit for this to be getting bigger. So we're going to threaten their bottom line. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. No, I love that. Appreciate it. So how much of this, or maybe none of it, is connected to the fact that we all think that we should be able to eat tomatoes in February?
I've got tomato sauce. I got dehydrated tomatoes. I got plenty of tomatoes from my farm I eat in February. They're just not fresh.
Right.
Yeah. So I think in the olden days, that's how we did it. We put things aside. And yeah, whatever. We think we should, I don't want to start with the things we think we should be able to do that are not natural. It seems to me the farther we get from nature, the more denatured we become. Like, it's kind of a tautology. Like, we're falling apart physiologically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, because we're being removed from creation.
Yep.
Like, and our children, if they're being raised separate from that, are never able to step into their full true selves, because they're living in this faux reality. It goes deep. And we just got to go back to the simple things and the natural ways. And, those who don't are going to die out. It's called evolution. Like, when you eat poorly, you fall apart. You do that for 2 or 3 generations, like, your kids start getting diseases that are life-threatening, which children should never have. And that's because of what you ate and what your grandparents ate and your parents, right? It's getting to be life-threatening for us now, and survival of our families is like in the offing. And that's horrible that should be the case, but it is the case. And it's actually really simple to turn it around. It's really simple to turn it around. You just got to control yourself and only put into your body the things that are from nature, and get your body out there into nature, which is possible too. But
yep.
Yeah, I don't know.
Dan, are you familiar with Pottinger's cats? Are either?
Did you hear Karl? Dan?
Are you familiar?
I heard
with
something about
Pottinger's
Pottinger. He's coming in very quiet for me. I'm having a hard time hearing.
Are you familiar with Pottinger's
Absolutely.
cats?
Price Pottinger Foundation, Weston A. Price. Absolutely. The research that was done where he took cats and fed them different, cooked food and raw food, and saw what happened to them as they broke down over multiple generations. And then you could reverse that breakdown. Yeah. 100%. And they've done that at Iowa State with pigs, and they've done it, at the various universities. They've experimented, taking the prize-winning sow from the Iowa State Fair and feeding her piglets poorly and her grand piglets poorly, and they're down to downer pigs in 3 generations. They take those grand piglets and they feed them well, and they get back to the prize-winning conformation in 3 generations, right? So we've seen this. The science has been done in all kinds of animals where, based on what you eat, you either evolve or devolve. Yeah, it's not really open for question. It's pretty much obvious, settled, clear science for anybody who wants to face it. But, if we're going to integrate those insights into your personal life, into your family, and actually stand with honor and try to do what's right, you may find some struggles. So, yeah, it's a process.
Our sponsor today is Remedy Animal Solutions. And as we continued our conversation with Daniel Dirksen, he shared about the ways that this is making a difference in their operation.
And so we haven't vaccinated our cows now for 2 years. We send cattle to community pasture, and I gave our pasture manager a bag of remedies, and I said, here's what to use for different sicknesses. If it's a wreck, it's on me. it's not on you. And he ended up phoning me halfway through the year. He said, I don't know, there's something to that these calves are getting better on these remedies. So, because those ones get loaded on trucks, I think just the stress we found, it seems like whatever reason, they go onto some crested wheatgrass when they first get there. And so there's crested wheatgrass in the field they usually start in. And it just seems like sometimes we get some grass scours going out there. And so this year I'm going to try giving them the scours and see if we can eliminate that. Because anything that has to have antibiotics has to come out of our program. And our program has grown so much that I need every animal we have. So I really need to find ways to make these remedies work for us so that we can keep everything in the program. And yeah, we spray them coming through the chute, or else we're treating them with salt. Just treating salt throughout the summer and putting that in front of them. And then my calves, anything that I tag. So I tag all my first calf heifers calves just for simplicity of tearing out sometimes. And then all my purebreds get tagged. So those calves will all get it when we tag them. And then if they get loaded on a truck, they get it. And then at branding time, we spray with remedies. And then I'm just trying to find ways to get calves deep salt. Last year, I was putting some molasses with the salt, and I was actually able to get calves to lick salt. So that was exciting.
If you're interested in more, you can find out more at remedyanimalsolutions.com. For sure. There's so many directions I could go on this conversation, but maybe some bonus content material. We'll talk more about some of those issues. But I mean, it doesn't take 3 generations necessarily to reverse the effects either.
No.
I could call the roll, and some of the people I've talked to on this podcast, the people who have healed themselves, autoimmune issues and the like, through just clean eating. And my favorite story is one of the elders at my church. His dad's 85 and his mom is 83. They just got back from a trip to Antarctica. And they go into town, they, drive 75, 80 miles into town every Thursday and go dance at the Senior Citizen Center. And I told one of my elders, I said, I want to be like your parents when I grow up. How do I do it? And he said, they eat whole food. That's all they eat is whole food. They don't eat anything processed. And I'm like, count me in, because they're just not deteriorating. They're not falling apart in their 80s. They were the oldest people by a decade on this trip to Antarctica, and I'm sure put some people 20 and 40 years younger than them to shame. So, so it's just, I think the way we eat is the most important thing for longevity, in our own survivability and thrivability, if I can make up a word. Karl, talk to me about kind of what results you've seen, maybe even some of the ways that you've gotten data back, and some of what they have communicated to you.
First, we've used a couple different labs to test our beef for the omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid ratio, as well as some of the other nutrients. And that being the easiest one to understand and communicate, we are right around that 1-to-1. So we were 0.8 to 1, 0.9 to 1, and 1.2 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. We did a test of some grocery store, like major retail market beef, and it was 9.8 to 1. So that it proved kind of those ratios that he's talking about. And that was just kind of, I guess, fodder for us to know that our system was working. As far as the omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid ratio, we kind of want to go a little bit deeper. And I'm curious from Dan, what were some of those other metabolites, particularly in beef, that showed to be causational or correlational, highly correlational to human health. But that has caused us to go there. And then as far as like breaking down dogmas, I also borrowed some of my neighbor's beef, because the butcher shop that we use is right across the road. So I get to go over there all the time and talk with them about their impressions of the beef that's coming through. And a good friend of mine, neighbor, who doesn't necessarily do grass finishing, he has excellent quality beef. And so I said, I'm going to test some of your beef. And his beef, even though it wasn't grass-fed, quote unquote grass-fed, it had a 6-to-3 ratio of 1.4 to 1. And mine was 1.2 to 1, which really knocked me upside of the head. And I'm like, how can this be? Well, he's not feeding a lot of grain, but he is feeding a tremendous amount, or not a tremendous amount, but a high percentage of corn silage in his ration. And so that caused me to delve deeper into where do the omega-6s and start to form in the corn plant. And it's in the ear, in the dough stage is when they start to form. And so that silage is cut not too long after that. And so that's really reawakened me to the possibility of raising corn again on our farm, but making sure that I harvest it in such a way as to minimize or eliminate any of the omega-6 fatty acids that come from that. And I would be interested to hear Dan's impression of that idea as well. Yeah, those results of lab results, both from my beef as well as from some other consumers, that I really want to nug down on this kind of conventional feedlot beef. What exactly in it, beyond maybe just including grains, is what's making people sick?
Dan, if you want to jump in there, I'll entertain that for sure.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, the omega-6s are basically nature's way of long-term storage of fats. And so you see them in seeds. You see them in the seed part of the plant. And the omega-3s are, when they're using it, and you find that when the leaves are green. So obviously you can have very, dramatic variations in the amount of fat in the plant. The lipid level can be 0.5%, or 3%, or 5%, depending on how healthy the plant is. So the more shiny the leaf, the more waxy cuticle there is, basically the more energy is in that plant. And that connects with high Brix readings. It connects with soil health. And so it's one thing to ask the question, which plants are we going to be growing? And at which stage do we cut them? And do we ferment them or not? It's another thing to say, what's the health and vigor of the plants that we're growing? And that connects really nicely with, again, the speed of finishing and all kinds of other stuff. Omega-3/6 is a nice place to start, but it's not a complete metric. And so, we looked at some of those more complex compounds, as well in the meat, and that we saw that correlated with that diversity, it seemed like, across the board. So the metric that we're going to be publishing this year, our sort of definition of nutrient density. I don't remember the names of all the different things. I mean, I should actually have it because I talk about it all the time, but there are 2 elements, 2 vitamins, 2 fatty acids, and 2 secondary metabolites. And it's those things in certain level and ratio. That's going to be our definition. At least our initial one. We're a small NGO. We're a small nonprofit educational organization. We're not like, the combination of governments of UK and the US and Germany and Japan all working together, right? We're just saying, hey guys, it kind of makes sense that there's a variation of quality in food. Here's our hypothesis about how you could actually make a definition of that quality. And so we're going to do the work and publish it and say, let's start this job off and let's share openly all the metadata, all the management practices, everything we found. Let's see if we can inspire people to build machinery, meters to test it and shift the market. Because if we can shift the market with it, that's going to inspire lots more research and lots more people to go into this space. But yeah, I mean, depending on where you're at in your climate zone, what are the plants that you can get to grow vigorously during your growing season? I mean, everybody's got different plants that during the year grow vigorously. And all I'm saying is get them in the ground, cut them before they head out, chop it and sile it. And it looks like you can really have tons of energy for your animals to eat all year long of really high caliber. There's a whole bunch of pieces of the puzzle to optimizing plant health, and that's what the foundation of our organizational work is teaching these courses. I call them principles of biological systems. It's about the microbiome. Well, the microbiome needs air to drink. So if air to breathe. So if your soil's too tight, they asphyxiate. They need water to drink. So if your soil's too dry, they die of thirst. They need food to eat. So if your soil's bare, they die of hunger. They need a broad suite of minerals for all the biochemistry to function. So if you don't have boron or cobalt or copper or whatever, everything else can be present, but that one little thing not being present will cause a whole bunch of problems to happen. So make sure you figure those pieces out. The microbes, of course, themselves must be there. So if you got land that's been beat down with chemicals for a long time, bringing that life itself back is actually a key piece of the puzzle. But it seems like when you can manage your land to have these basic environmental conditions present, get that diversity going, take a nap, play with the kids. It doesn't have to be stress and strain and debt and all that kind of stuff. We can talk about being empowered, land stewards with autonomy and, independence, which I think is the way we should be aiming for everybody. I think everybody should have land. I don't think you need a hell of a lot necessarily, but imagine if everybody had a couple acres, 5 acres, and that was theirs, and maybe they couldn't sell it. It was just like part of what you get as being a citizen, is a piece of land, and you can raise your kids there, and you can have a simple house. You don't have to be a wage slave. No, I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities here to walk this path down forward towards solutions, and systemic solutions. But it's all like actually kind of easy, right? If you can see through all the scatter, the way of nature is simple and it's honorable and is fulfilling. So.
Yeah, well, I think we were all designed to live that way, honestly. I mean, God put Adam and Eve in the garden to tend and keep it, right?
Yes.
And I always say that's why you have such a high overlap of Christians with those in agriculture, because they're closest to what God designed us to do. And then they're also directly dependent on God providing rain, whereas the guy in the supermarket here in Dallas, there's like 18,000 steps between him and his food, and billions of acres that you can pull from to make sure that the shelves aren't empty. Now, COVID, one of the good things about it was people got to see empty shelves in America for the first time, and it woke a lot of people up and said, "Hey, I should go shake the hand that feeds me." Hat tip to Brian Alexander, and figure out how to get to know these guys and develop a relationship with them. And then they also started asking questions about how is my food being raised, and it kind of tipped that scale too. So I mean, it's been quite a journey we've been on for the last few years, right?
Yeah. No, there's definitely some silver linings to that whole COVID experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of awakening has happened in the past few years.
Yeah.
I remember talking about a lot of these things 20 plus years ago. I was
right
after 9/11 happened, I'm like, nah, I don't think so.
Screaming at a brick wall.
Yeah, well, just people didn't know. There's a lot of things that hadn't gotten out yet, and the internet and YouTube and stuff. There's a lot more awareness now about what's going down.
Yeah,
I say that's you can't act until you're aware, and so awareness is foundational in many cases, and it's been great to have the alternate media ecosystem evolving and developing. Yeah.
So Dan, Karl mentioned some ratios earlier, 9 point something to 1, 1.2 to 1, 1.4 to 1, 0.89 to 1, I think he said. And these are ratios of omega-6 to omega-3. And that is one of 8 relationships, or one of 8 kind of levels that you are measuring in this process. Do I understand that right?
Well, like I said, we measured over 150 different nutrients and 200 different species in the microbiome and all the other metrics. And after we did all the statistics and looked for patterns, we were able to find 8 different nutrients that if you look at just those 8 and you measure how much of them is there, we can say this is your 10 out of 100, 40 out of 100, 80 out of 100. And omega-3 and 6 are 2 of those 8.
Right.
2 of those 8 nutrients.
Yep. Yep. And can you just set the parameters there? What's good? What's bad? Is there a diminishing point of returns? Can you just set the parameters there for everybody?
I got my bachelor's degree in history barely. So I am not a PhD. I am not a nutritionist. I never took statistics. The reason I raise the money and coordinate the science with scientists is so they can do that job.
Okay.
Not my job.
All right.
So they're writing the paper. We've got this thing called the Bionutrient Definition Standards Board. We got researchers from around the planet that are all part of it, like on the leading edge, people researching animals and meat, and they know their stuff. And so they're the ones with all the metadata. They're the ones that are writing the papers. And so when it's written, I can show it to you, or I can read it and tell you what it says, but I haven't read it yet.
Okay.
I'm just, it's a scientific process, and we got to let them do their thing. So I'm a farmer, I got decent amount of common sense, decent amount of intelligence, decent amount of like get up and go, but I don't know, that kind of stuff is like not my job. So
Yeah. I have an associate's degree in biblical studies, barely. Also, it was one pivotal conversation with the dean of students that went in my favor, that caused the diploma to be signed rather than not signed. So, I'm with you.
Clay,
So
all I've heard is
yes,
you have an omega-6 to omega-3
all in
fatty
it.
acid
So
ratio.
that's the one you want to be worried about passing your tests in.
Clay, from what I've heard,
go ahead,
you
Carl.
have a 6-3 ratio that's above about 3-1 or 4-1, then it's questionable whether it's really truly grass-fed.
Okay. Sure. I appreciate that.
A nutritionalist said the 6-3 ratio is basically her BS monitor. And then she looks at other things in addition to that to see the true nutrient density of it.
Right. Exactly right. So that's why those are 2 of the 8 metrics, is that one.
Right.
But then if you don't have any of the secondary metabolites, that makes you cause you to be skeptical, and looking at these vitamins, etc. So yeah, exactly. What we want to do is we want to make it really simple for people that they don't have to read labels. They don't have to understand what these different numbers and names and all that stuff is. They can literally, pull out their phone, flash a light, and get an answer: 20, 40, 60, 80 out of 100. And if we can make it that simple, and the Bunny Love today is 20, and the Cal Organic is 40, and the Bolthouse Farms is 60, that's today what your choices are on the shelf. And as long as people know they can trust the number they get, because a bunch of people in the movement have all looked at it and said, this is trustworthy, right? Then it's like, we don't have to trust the government to give us a certification label, or the the grocery store to make up their own label, right? So
what does all natural mean again? Yeah, we can again, that's another conversation for another time.
Give enough money to certain people and they can make synthetic materials count as all natural, right? That's
Right.
what it is right now. So yeah, exactly. Get away from the words, do the science, measure the damn thing itself.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dan, where are we at on this journey? What are you see as the next milestones and hurdles that we're looking at as far as having this information broadly available to the public?
Well, I mean, you can't make a meter to measure quality until you've defined what quality is. So beef is the first thing we've worked on to define quality, and we'll have those papers published this year where we can actually have that number. And then we can go to people that want to make money selling meters and say, hey, who wants to make money selling meters that do this? And I'm sure there's going to be a number of different people that want to compete and sell things. Our thought is, well, we eat potatoes too, and we eat wheat too, and we drink milk too, and we eat apples too, and we eat carrots too. So we got to do this job for all the food. And so, yeah, like, we're an educational organization. We're a nonprofit. We do everything in the commons, open source, not proprietary. And so what that means is, to fund a complicated science project, we have to find people who have money that are willing to not turn it into more money, but to do something for the greater good. And I would say the biggest hurdle is raising the money to do the research, because once the research is done, the economic incentive of profit can be applied to pull this thing through really fast. But we have to do the research well, properly, openly, categorically, systemically, before we have those numbers we can trust to build meters around and everything else. So yeah, we're looking for 25 million to define nutrient density in the next 20 crops. Right now, that's our project. So anybody who wants to read more about that, bionutrientinstitute.org is the website where you can read the treaty and see the plan and everything else. But step by step, we've been working on this the research side for 8 years now, and the education side for closer to 20. So good things don't happen overnight, but it feels like we're getting momentum, and we're not going to stop until we get it done. So yeah, it'll happen as fast as the money shows up to do the research. Otherwise, we'll keep doing our education and everything else, and it'll take longer. So
yeah. And I'm guessing, big food company XYZ isn't writing the check for this. So how is the money coming in?
You'd be interested to know which big food companies see the writing on the wall and are really excited to straighten up their supply chain before the meters come out. a lot of these big food companies do plan things out 5, 10, 15 years down the road. And they've done their market research, and they have understood that the people who buy their food care about the health of their children. They don't particularly care about soil carbon, but they do care about their children not being sick. And so a lot of these companies have made claims for climate stuff and carbon. We're committing $1 billion, we're committing $10 billion, They've got these claims to do this stuff, and their customers don't care, and their customers do care about nutrition. And so we're saying, hey, if you've already committed $10 billion to do climate stuff, and you can actually get nutrition taken care of as part of the process, what do you think about that? And they're like, that sounds pretty interesting. So it's coming from all different directions. I mean, what do we get? We got money from General Mills a few years ago. We got money from Hormel through Applegate a couple of years ago. So yeah, I mean, it's mostly philanthropy, but I'm not going to say that big food companies are our enemies.
Right.
In my experience, some of these big food companies who have a bad reputation for the quality of their food know that threatens their market share, know that if they can straighten out their supply chain before we come out with these meters, and when people can test, they'll find that their stuff is better than their competitors, they'll get more money. They're like, that's good business strategy. So it's just straight up economics and capitalism and all that kind of stuff. So I've been, I grew up on an organic farm. I was told these guys are all evil, right? I was told, lots of people were bad. The government was bad. The universities were bad. The corporates were bad. Like, we're God's chosen people, and those are all bad people. And I found a bunch of really good people in a lot of those institutions that mean well, that want to do the right thing, that can see the argument and it can align with the interest of those entities. So what do they say? Everybody wants to be first to be second. If one comes in with $1 million pledge, I bet we can get 5 more really easily. But getting that one to come in with the first pledge that's where the hurdle is. So we're working it from multiple angles, and word of mouth and reputation and, whatever, God's grace, it's all working. And it's not my job to understand what's going on. It's my job to respond to what shows up in front of me. So I feel very heartened by how it's proceeding.
Cool.
It was a grand vision a long time ago. It's been many years between then and now, but we got serious momentum.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very good. Karl, I'm going to give you last word, and last word can include a question for Dan or anything you want to say. So, go ahead.
I just appreciate Dan and other people like him that are trying to do the best at whatever they're doing. I don't care if it's pumping septic tanks or changing locks and keys or farming or whatever. I just really enjoy being around people that are enthusiastic about doing a good job at the work that God has for them. And that's what we want to do on our farm as well. And so it's fun to be around other people, talk to other people that have that same enthusiasm for whatever, because we're not all the same. God didn't make us all hands or feet or heads. He gave us all our own separate thing to do in this grand scheme of things.
Karl, Dan, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clay.
Very good stuff there. Really appreciate Dan and Karl and their perspective and the way that they have gone about figuring this out and pursuing this doggedly, and look forward to the future of this information becoming public and the opportunity to share it more widely and maybe have it influence the conversation in American agriculture. Looking forward to the next episode of the Working Cows podcast. Should be out actually in just a few days. We're going to share with you a conversation that I had with Dan Glenn of Deep Grass Grazers. They've got a bull sale coming up here at the beginning of April, and wanted to have that conversation with him and share with you some of what they've been doing there, and look forward to sharing that conversation coming your way real soon on another episode of the Working Cows podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages. resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.